Hi, it's Adam Piplica here from Magical Penny, the blog where we teach people how to learn to invest, grow your pennies and live a full life. And today I have Dave Ursillo here. I'm really happy that he's managed to come all the way from America to England. He's an 8-time published author, lifelong writer and creative entrepreneur, and he's going to talk about using artistry as a vehicle for self-awareness, spiritual awakening and worldly change. Today we're going to have a conversation anchored in a purpose. It's one of Dave's projects he's having, just to allow us to have a conversation about things that matter to us. And in the context of Magical Penny, having value in the world and making sure that your money counts is really important to us. And we write and talk about making sure that we use the value that we have and the money we have in the right way. So thanks, Dave, for being with us today.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, this is the first house call that I've made for my Conversations in Purpose project, but it's been a long time coming. It's great to be here with you here in New York, and thanks for hosting me in this conversation. Like, as you were saying, it's interesting because what you suggested we talk about today about value and providing content, it's a really ripe conversation that we're always having online, and we're using the internet as a tool, as a means of communication, as a way to build a platform for ourselves, to start a business for ourselves. And we want to provide value. We want to provide content, something that's unique and rich and enriching to those who it may ultimately reach. And what's unique about that conversation piece that you brought up is because this project of mine, this Conversations in Purpose project, started off very experimentally and all about bringing two people together to have a conversation together about a meaningful topic that we could kind of explore jointly and ultimately hopefully discover something that we didn't intend to by the end of the conversation, just by being completely honest. And I think that is where my mind goes first and foremost when we talk about providing value. I think it has to come from a place of honesty, and I think value really originates with your own awareness, but with the intention, the intentional energy that you intend to provide value, because that means you're already focusing on the impact that it could potentially have with a reader, with a listener, a customer, or a client. And I think that's like the basic place where you need to start, is by focusing your energy and your intentions into that place where you're saying, my intention is to provide value. My intention is to provide worthy content of somebody, because you're already bearing that responsibility in a healthy way.
I think a lot of people, they have a job and they get paid, but sometimes it's quite hard to see where they find value. And I think a lot of people who are dissatisfied with their job or dissatisfied with where they are at life is because they haven't quite seen the impact that they're having in the world. I think a lot of people worry about money because they haven't thought about the way that they can give, really. And being able to give is just so empowering generally.
Yeah, that's I'll jump in because that's a really interesting point, and it's one I haven't really ever thought of before. But a lot of what I've been focusing on now, you mentioned, Adam, that I do a lot of work with writers and creatives and creative entrepreneurs and people who consider themselves to be artists in some capacity, many writers. And one of the overarching themes that I've seen emerge in the last few years, and especially within the last year, through my work with the Literati Writers, my online writers group, which you are a member, and we're an online writing community, and it's a sort of framed as an online support system for writers and creatives around the world to find ways in which they can make the creative journey more rewarding. And from this experience with the Literati Writers, I've noticed that there is that kind of overarching fear or shame about what value do I provide, but it goes beyond the scope of just business and in the workplace. And oftentimes I think it really does speak to a human level, that we all share this similar fundamental, just on the basis of our being human, this fear that we're not enough. And it's easy to understand why. I mean, turn on the TV and everything that are what we culturally value as success is one and the same with fame, with abundances of wealth, with the perception that, the people who are rich and famous and wealthy and who have succeeded, quote unquote, succeeded, are the ones who have it all figured out. And we constantly are comparing and contrasting ourselves to these images of success and these images of those who have done it. And we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how we can emulate that behavior, how we can follow their path, how we can take their advice and become like them.
I think that you make a great point, because I'm sure if you're here on Magical Penny, it's because you're reading about money, you're reading about how you can save money, how you can make more money, and it's really easy to to compare. You naturally compare yourself to others, and you want to follow these tips. I give you tips on Magical Penny on how to make more money or how to invest it, but we're all in different positions. We all have different we're starting levels, and we have our own different experiences, and we can't always take other people's advice. The advice has to come from within from our own experiences. So I always find it quite difficult to find the right thing, the right combination between what's worked for other people and what will work for you. And somewhere in the middle ground, you'll find where you can create the most value.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not to say that taking others' advice, I mean, that's just how we learn. And I think that, I mean, when an individual provides value through advice, stories, experiences, strategies, and tips, those are all so helpful in expanding our own awareness and our own knowledge, and giving us a vast array of opportunities to do different things. But I think that when we solely focus on the outcomes of our journey in life, to succeed, to figure it all out, and using that basis, as one that says we need to have certain amounts of things in order to be happy or to be fulfilled and to be purposeful, that we're usually just leading ourselves astray. But of course, I mean, to figure out how to make money for yourself in a way to provide for yourself, for your family, to invest wisely, it's not only practical, but it can teach you a lot about living your journey, living your life in ways that are more aligned to what you want. And it's similar with writing. I think you can use all these different means and mediums, whether it's a passion, a hobby, or an outright necessity like making money and advancing through your career. They're all not only provide you with practical things, and they enable you to help others, but they also they set you up for life.
I think the thing with writing is a uniquely personal thing. You always think of you coming from your own place and you're putting out your message to the world. Where it becomes difficult is if you have a message that you feel and you're writing for yourself, but you need to find the intersection between your own experiences and where other people can benefit from it to find the value. For example, I loved your writing. Ever since I first discovered you, I found your writing before I met you in person, which is always useful. It's great, and to see you in real life, it kind of added context to what I'd already read. And you wrote a lot about the title of your blog, "Lead Without Followers," and the way that leadership needs to come from within. But I know that you were, as much as you were a brilliant writer and you had a compelling message, you needed to kind of refocus that message sometimes to find something where people could perhaps identify it more, or to clarify where you're coming from. And I know you transitioned into the writers group, the Literati Writers, which is phenomenal, and that's a way that you've kind of transitioned from leading without followers with your writing, but to translate that into something where you're getting more of a response from other people, and how you've kind of shifted the value proposition.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. And it's one of the fascinating things about the conversation about having, providing value and meaning, and leading or serving or being in a position where you're aspiring to help people. You want to provide advice and strategy and ideas, or like me, I'm a big proponent of where my story really begins is having left the world of politics and public service back in the States, and feeling very disillusioned to the system that told me that I needed to wait X number of years and, like I was saying earlier, have the right amounts of money and the right amounts of fame or followers, and I had to rise up the ladder to reach a position where I could help people or lead people. And that intention, I felt, was really honest and true. It was a natural calling for me, and I felt that I was more capable now than the system told me that I was. And because I believed that small things like a kind word to a stranger on the street was an act of giving, and that being kind to someone new who you meet, or practicing things like patience and compassion with our family members who maybe really challenge our patience and compassion, all these different things. I really believe that small actions and how you live your life is its own form of leadership, because you leave a wake of love in your path. And
that's a beautiful expression, just by the way.
And that's
leaving a wake of love.
And that's what I think value ultimately is, because I can write endlessly, and you who's listening to this might not like it, and that's fine, and that's what it's about. I mean, we all have different opinions, different tastes, And Lord knows that what we do with our lives isn't about trying to prove to everybody that we're right about something and that they're wrong, or I need to convince you that my writing is good. You can hate it, and you can tell me that you hate it. It's fine.
How much do you write for yourself, and how much do you write for other people?
That's interesting because I believe that there's a really important distinguishing factor there. So I write oftentimes for me. You fall into a different voice when you're creating for self versus creating with the intention of others reading it and seeing it. So in terms of a breakdown, I'm not really sure. It may be half and half. I spend time writing in journals and writing in Evernote and writing blog posts that are sometimes just for me. And sometimes those pieces it'll be like I'm writing to myself, and sometimes I'll share those and they'll be well received. Sometimes I'll share them and it'll be crickets. But other times, I think it's really important to, when you're a writer or you're a creative or you're a blogger, or even if you're in business, to really kind of understand that there are some differences between doing something for yourself and doing something for others. They're necessarily entwined, though.
Yeah, I find that when I'm writing for other people, I often think I really should be taking my own advice. And in a way, I find it easier to give tips to other people and then reflect back and live it to myself than just to tell myself to do something, because I feel like I'm putting it out to the world that this is what I think other people should do, so I should lead by example.
Yeah, it's a way to keep yourself accountable and responsible, because we all become teachers of what we most need to learn ourselves. So we become teachers for others of the things that we most desire to learn. So if you're the type that is really striving to learn how to be in a relationship with someone, a loving, healthy partnership with somebody, you will ultimately become sort of a teacher of that. It might not mean that you're on stage or in a classroom to teach that, but it means your awareness is focused in that place, and you're using yourself and your life as its own experimentation grounds, or your life is your curriculum, and you're learning it as you go, and you'll be able to levy that advice and those experiences into stories for other people. And that's what I really think. Ultimately, providing value to me is more about me striving to lead by example, but also to provide a wealth of opportunities where a human being, through the computer, through a book, through a conversation like we're having here, can see themselves in me, see yourself in me, but through me striving to allow that. Trying to open up myself and make myself feel even vulnerable, and just say, like, just so you know that you're not alone, that you're not the only one sharing this struggle or this experience. That's one of it.
You're listening to A Conversation with Purpose with Adam Piplica and Dave Ursillo. Thanks for being with us. In part 2, we talk about why Dave writes books, and when it comes to providing value to the world, how exploring yourself makes you more relatable to others. I think one of the things that I found brilliant about you is you wrote poetry that was in God Whispers on the Wind. You published it, but that wasn't to publish. Essentially,
no.
You were writing poetry for yourself, and I write poetry for myself as well. I don't publish it as much unless unless I feel really good about it.
Yeah.
But I think it was really interesting that you wrote that for yourself, but it was only through sharing it and publishing it that you probably saw your work in a new way, and I bet it had more of an impact in ways that you didn't expect.
Yeah, it absolutely did, Adam. And that's a great example of me writing for myself and ultimately sharing that, just because I was curious. I was curious if anybody would feel the same. I was curious if it would speak to them, or if they would think I was a poetic fraud. But it was an example of writing all these poems that were in a totally different voice, totally unfamiliar to anything that I had ever written before, totally different to anything I'd ever shared with anyone before. Like talking about love now, and talking about a very a-religious understanding of God or the universe or the higher power that we're all kind of connected to in our lifetime. Talking about those things before, it was a side of myself that I'd never allowed anybody to see. And it was something that through the process of writing I was able to tap into and share. And a year later, this book, a collection of poetry called God Whispers on the Wind, was maybe the antithesis of my first book, which was an examination of political leadership and what it means to be a leader in your own life. And it felt so honest and true. I think that's why it's been so well received, even more than a year later, because I think it's a really human expression.
Have you ever regretted sharing, have you felt like you've ever been too open with your writing or in anything else?
Yeah. I don't think so. I'm sure there's been something that I've said that I've regretted, but I really take it as a part of the practice of being a writer, being a creative, or leading by example. I think is constantly pushing my own self to the edges of where I'm comfortable. And going beyond that. I know I wrote, most recently wrote what I published it on Facebook because I haven't been blogging much lately, and I'm kind of trying to gear up for my big blog relaunch. So I'm saving up my juicy content. But I posted it on Facebook because I wanted to share it with my friends, and I wrote about this idea of why I want to write books, because it's a valid question, right? Because the question of being a writer and wanting to write books, one might assume that one is extremely self-indulgent and wants to hear oneself for hundreds of pages.
And there's also lots of different platforms now, so why books as opposed to anything
right.
else?
Why books as opposed to anything else? And something about the book is truly intimate, and I think it's a really deep reflection of it's a really deep vessel by which I think that you can meet somebody without personally meeting them. And I think that that's what I love about writing is I strive to expose myself and my fears, my worries, my insecurities, and rather than posture to build myself up into something that I'm certainly not, to just constantly be revealing more and more depths of my own humanity, because I think that those are the bonds of empathy and compassion, relatability and connection through which we all see one another. We see ourselves. We realize we're not alone. We realize that we're all in it together. We realize that we're all one. And then the more that I dig, the more that I share, I think that if you can pour that into a book, it's a beautiful way to meet someone without having ever met them. And if that day comes when they do meet you, suddenly you can feel more connected to them, like they've never seen your face, but they've kind of seen your heart. And I think it's really special. It involves a lot of responsibility. It involves a lot of hard work, a lot of struggle, a lot of strife. You're constantly dancing with these fears, like, who the hell am I to be doing this?
Exactly. It's a lot about self-belief.
Yeah.
I know I've struggled with feeling if I'm doing something if I'm writing for myself or doing anything, it can be like self-indulgent and like, who am I? Could I be creating value in a more structured way, in a better way? Should I be more facing out as opposed to looking in? But I think from what you've been saying, it's recognizing that we are more valuable than we give ourselves credit for, and people can get value from something that you might necessarily not think that is valuable.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to, I believe that the more you can turn into yourself, the more you that you can become, the more whole that you feel, the more that you become self-aware of the depths of what you believe, what you value, what you want, need, and desire in life, and just as much what you don't want, what you don't need, what you don't desire. I believe that the more that you can explore these depths of your soul and your individuality and your uniqueness, the more that you will become necessarily relatable to others. I think that exploring the self is a way that you learn about others. I think that experiencing more stories from others is how you learn about yourself. And I really believe that this human mission that we're living, when we're in this lifetime, is it could take endless varieties of forms, and you might have different passions and hobbies and interests and needs and desires and everything that I'm saying. For all our uniqueness, for all our individuality, for all our differences, in the end, we're all human, and I think that at our human core is oneness. I think we're all fundamentally equal. That's the most paramount fairness and justice that there is in life. And I believe just the medium of writing for me, in a lot of ways, the medium of yoga, all these different hobbies and practices and things that we experience, for you, it might be investing, it might be learning about money and helping others cultivate financial freedom as an expression of being more them. If you don't need to slave away at a job for 12 hours a day, and if you can cultivate more financial freedom to be more you and have more time to explore the depths of your soul, then that's the exact same thing.
I hope you are enjoying this conversation. In part 3, Dave shares why he abandoned his career in politics to explore a new path of teaching personal leadership and unlocking creativity in others. I felt I could provide value, and I was interested, and I was learning about investing and money, and maybe I've done that to the detriment of other aspects of my life. Like, I'm sure, Dave, you might not know how much that I enjoy cycling, and I certainly do a lot of singing and have a lot of music side to me. I don't necessarily put all that online in the same way perhaps because I feel that the value add is different. Like I love singing. I sing multiple times a week, and yes, people enjoy hearing my voice, and I've enjoyed, but I don't feel that people are willing to pay me to sing in the same way that they'd pay me to give them business consultation or investing advice. Not that I can accept money for investing advice because I'm not qualified yet. But
Nice disclaimer.
I think that's
Yeah.
the way that I feel like I can give value to the world is different to some of my interests, and I think that it can be difficult finding that balance between what you as a person enjoy and the hobbies and interests versus how that shows up in the world in terms of people actually willing to pay you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that those are great examples with cycling and singing. That, I mean, those are long-term, lifelong sorts of practices that I think act as mirrors. And every time you sing, every time you cycle, every time I go to the yoga mat, it's more about, for me, the action of practicing that hobby, that passion, that pastime reveals more about me in that moment, that present moment. And I feel, I can tell if my body feels tweaky in this one place, or if I'm sore, or if I'm tired, or if I'm cranky, and I don't feel like practicing yoga even though I'm there, and I'm swearing in my head about, this is so stupid, why do I do this to myself? And because these are the thoughts that go in my head when I do yoga. I'm not very Om Shanti and like prayers for the world, but I think that no one's going to pay to watch me do yoga, because why the hell would they? They would probably rather pay to not watch me do yoga. But something like, in terms of value, I have learned this about yoga and writing. I think that they're quite similar, that you can use body movement to open up your creative energy, and you can use something like yoga to feel more comfortable understanding that creativity is an expression of the self, just like yoga is kind of a reflection of the self, rather than ascribing to become something that you're not. So now I'm coupling those two things with yoga and writing and creativity, and melting them together to try to use one to open up the other with writing retreats and new workshops and in-person experiences. So that's one example of, I never thought that I would become a yoga teacher. I'm training to become a yoga teacher in 2014. And I didn't do so with the intention of providing value to people, but when I really purely sensed that there's a connection there, that I think that could help people become more themselves and do more of what they want and what they dream and desire, I said, I'm gonna dip my toe into that. I'm gonna explore it a little more deeply and see if maybe I'll do workshops, maybe I'll become a yoga teacher. But it was more, I think that we can provide value in a incredible number of ways to others and get paid for it, and that really helps deepen relationships and customer client relationships and forge businesses. But sometimes you fall into it and you don't even realize it.
It's because you're getting in touch with who you are and what you are, because it's, in a way, anyone can sell anything if you look at it at face value. But if you go in deeper, you have to believe in what you are. Like, you can authentically talk about yoga retreats you might want to do, or writing retreats, because you've done so much work on yourself, on who you are and what you're about. For example, I've been writing about money for several years, and yes, I have had some experience, but I felt like I wasn't fully able to help people without going deeper into it. I'm now pursuing financial qualifications, and it sounds silly to frame it like this, but I feel like by doing these financial qualifications, I'm learning more about myself in a broader way, and what I find interesting. And it adds just a level of legitimacy that you have through experience, just like you couldn't necessarily sell a yoga workshop if you hadn't done much yoga.
Right.
As much as you might know the benefits of yoga, you can get, you can feel more at peace, you can get more flexible, you can more in tune with your body, but you can put that on a sales page, and yes, it's valuable it's valuable to sell yoga. But you need to, if you're taking it the next step and you have that personal experience, you can add some. It's not just about some words on a page. There's some magic behind the writing, because you've had that personal experience and you've looked in before you look.
Yeah,
go out.
And that speaks perfectly, Adam, to my experience with talking about leadership and personal leadership, and it's why I felt the real need and the desire to shift away from talking about leadership explicitly. It's because our cultural definitions of what it means to be a leader are very well in bed. And so here I was trying to tell people that you could be a leader without being a traditional leader. And who was I but, an American kid in my mid-20s who was, scrapping his pennies together and like trying to get by. Not the Mahatma Gandhi of Americans in their 20s. It was like there was too much I was trying to prove to people about what I felt was true, that you could lead by example in your life and leave a wake of of love in your path. So I decided that I would abandon that altogether, and you might shift away from something that's been a long time passion, but kind of reinvent it. And to continue to live it, but almost in a new light. And so, writing and creativity, and now with yoga more. But that's exactly it. And now I think I feel more legitimate because I feel more me. I feel more me, and not like I'm trying to prove something to people. I'm not trying to provide value to people. I know that I provide value to people, and it's a really nice feeling. It's a really nice feeling because the more that you work with people, the more you have conversations with people, the more you can understand the roots of their struggles, whether it relates to your own interests and hobbies, or just overarching struggles and goals and dreams, that you start to find more and more of a sweet spot. And I really feel like it requires a lot of digging to get into it.
In this final part of this conversation with purpose, Dave shares insights into how to nurture our self-belief and how giving of ourselves, despite our uncertainty, is an act of love. I was also in my early 20s, and I put on a suit and had a photo shoot and said, right, I'm going to write about money. And as you go through the process, you kind of get more credibility, both outwardly but also inwardly, just
Right.
through living it. And that's the wonderful thing about getting older as well.
Yeah, right.
Because
yeah.
you have more to draw on and more life experiences. But you do still need to start somewhere. And in a way, I think as I've got older, it's harder to start to reinvent or to start something new, because sometimes you have an excuse when you're younger, like, oh, you're only young, it's okay to suck at this. Whereas, say, with my writing, I was a lot less fearful to write and publish to the web when I was younger, because I thought, well, I'm just a young kid, I'm just writing, it's fine. As I've gotten older, I have developed a little bit more of a fear of serving and writing and doing things, because the older you get, you feel like you should be getting better anyway, and it's harder to get back to that novice sense, or you feel that other people would judge you because if you're so passionate about this, why have you not been doing it earlier?
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot of social factors like that, right? There's a lot of kind of identifying or just being cognizant of the fact that we're being seen, we're being heard, we're being judged. It's really difficult for everybody to go through those periods, but I think that ultimately you really can't entertain those thoughts very much, because they're ultimately fear-based thoughts. And you yourself said it, so you're aware of it. You have that fear there, but if the difference is not doing this means that I'm submitting to my fears, but doing it means it's an act of love or an act of giving or service. For me, I think you really need to continually nurture that self-belief and that self-confidence that what you're doing is good because you have good intentions behind it. And I'm terrified all the time. I'm terrified, not just like walking around, like hiding in the corner or running away when somebody walks by me on the street, but in terms of doing new things, and it all terrifies me because I don't know what I'm doing. I figure out everything as I go. I learn by failing a lot.
But it's so inspiring, because I know that I've looked at some of the things that you've done, and just by putting yourself out there and saying, I'm going to do this, or I am this, just even making that statement, even if you don't believe it and you're just trying to prove it to yourself, I'm not sure, but it looks convincing.
Well, thank you. But that's an example of striving to just lead from wherever I am, to live from wherever I am, and being totally present with whatever opportunities are available, and just going with it. I think that that's all that I really am good at, is being honest with myself, and it can even be a fight. And a lot of times I need to prove things to myself, and I go on trips like this one that I'm on now through the UK and Ireland, because I could have sat at home for a few weeks and done my work, or I could have pushed myself beyond my boundaries and really kind of scared the shit out of myself, pardon my language, and go through these new towns and cities that I've never been, and not know how I'm going to get there or who I'm going to meet there, and just for the sake of, because I could invite the challenge. And I think that's that mentality that you're talking about, like that childlike mentality of being a novice and kind of exposing yourself to it. And in the end, I never really had that many bad experiences of being a novice. I mean, other than when it feels terrible and then you pull yourself out of it and you're like, I survived. But I mean, sharing that, it's not like you're doing it out of, to attract sympathy from people, but the more that you expose about yourself and fear and worry and uncertainty, you realize that we are all equally subject to them, that nobody knows.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Everyone, when you're a child and you think that adults know what they're doing, but
Right.
really adults don't know what they're doing. I've become an adult, and
Yeah.
and it's kind of empowering in a way, because you realize that there is less mystery. There isn't this knowledge that you just suddenly you wake up one day and you know everything. And
Yeah.
there's people just living these lives, and they're having children, and we're messing with nuclear energy,
Right.
and we all don't really have a clue, really.
Yeah, it's it's true. We never will have it all figured out. Now, there'll be things that I understand now that I didn't before. Like, I know how to format a blog post or just to start a blog. But do I ever know where that is heading? We're all equally subject to this uncertainty, this perpetual uncertainty, perpetual unknown. And I, like you, Adam, I used to look at adults and look at parents and just be like, these parents know how to raise children. This is why they are parents. And as I get older, I'm like, some of my friends are getting married and thinking about having kids, and I'm like, holy crap, like 6 months ago, you couldn't feed yourself. You couldn't cook a meal for yourself, and now you're gonna feed children. And and I think that just kind of ruminating on that reality, that we'll always be able to gain more skills and abilities and experience, but to just, in the end, ultimately, we're all just equally just striving into this unknown place in our lives. I think it makes it a lot more accessible to throw yourself into something new, because you'll figure it out, and if it's not meant to be, then it's not meant to be, but you'll recover, and because we're all just kind of doing that anyway.
And we've all got more value than we think.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's always, just at the very basis of being a human being, you provide value, because your life is important, because someone else can see themselves in you. You can always endlessly see yourselves in others. That's one of the great things about when I travel, even to places that aren't, wildly different than the States, is to see life being lived in ways that's not very different in the end.
Yeah, that's when I went to Japan, and you have these ideas that everything's so different, and it's just and in some ways it is.
Right.
Yeah, the toilets are crazy, but you look up at the sky, and we all have the same sky, and yes, there's different plants, but there's still similar vegetation. There's still earth, and you just realize how similar we all are. We all need sleep. Well, we all need to eat and need to do everything, and all have the same fears and everything. It's
and I just think being aware of that and really appreciating that. It's not just hyperbole. I mean, it is really true. It's something we can easily take for granted because it's just the subject of life. But I think that with whatever that you aspire to become, whatever you aspire to do, that ruminating on that and reflecting on that and remembering that we are all ultimately equal. We'll never have it all figured out. And whatever we consider success now, when we get there, we'll still be trying to strive for more, or maybe our ideas of success change and they require us to reinvent ourselves. But it's just about ultimately finding a true sense of presence with where you are right now. And from that place, doing what you can and starting small and leading by example and putting yourself out there. Because I think that's an originating place from which you will never have very much to regret. It's a very honest place, and if you can remain true to yourself in that way, you might succeed in something, you might fail. Lord knows I have plenty of times, but you always recover, and you're better for it.
I think on that note, we should finish this. Thank you so much, Dave, for being here to talk to me. There's so many different things to consider and reflect on, and I really do appreciate you coming over and having this chat.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam. It's great to chat with you, and everybody who's interested in having a conversation with me, I can't promise that I'll show up on your doorstep, but you can find me at daveursillo.com or find my writers group at literatywriters.com.
I highly recommend Literati Writers. It's been brilliant. I'll put more information in the description below.
Thanks, Adam.